Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hello, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah.
It's been a day or two since we recorded, honestly.
I feel like I haven't seen Cindy in a very long time.
Which is not true.
Not true.
It's just, it's been a day or two.
Yeah.
So we're hoping we're not all that rusty.
I feel like we might be, but oh well, we'll work it out.
We'll work it out.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we say rusty, we mean with the technology, not each other.
Yeah.
But at any rate.
And not my dog, Rusty.
Yes, we're talking technology. Yeah. At any rate, we do have a couple of places to shout out. One around the world, one around the United States, because we appreciate all of our preschool peeps so much. And we've actually been getting more contact forms from people, and we love it.
We love it.
So tell us, who's been listening, watching, whatever they're doing?
Hello to everyone in Rwanda.
Rwanda.
Yes. And to everyone in Oak Creek, Wisconsin.
Hello, folks, and thank you for being preschool peeps. Tell your friends and family and neighbors to tune in. You might want all different sorts of people to tune into this episode because of what the topic is, which, by the way, we still haven't come up with a title for. We're going to have to do that when we're done recording it. Kind of wanted to see how this went.
Yes.
I have experienced something recently, as my son would say, many times. And by the way, my son is an adult, but he says this all the time. Many times I have experienced this conversation, and I think it's something that we who work with young children, or even the families who are raising with them, have to really think about, just because it's coming up so often.
Yeah.
It's becoming a common thing. Maybe it was somewhat common in the past, but it's become definitely part of my atmosphere more.
Yeah.
And here's the conversation I'm talking about. I have both classroom staff and administrators, directors, principals telling me these stories about families who make a family decision and now want all the other families to do the same thing. And I'll give you an example. Let's say a family decides their child cannot watch a particular TV show, and which they have every right to make that decision, right? Yep. So they don't want their children watching a particular TV show. And then the children go to school and children are talking about that TV show. Right. And the family comes in and says to the person in charge, can you please ask the other families to not watch that show because they're talking about it in front of my child who's not allowed to watch it.
Right.
Another story, you're laughing, right? Wait, let me get through the second story.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one example.
Yeah.
Another example of what's happened is that a family decides they're not going to expose their children to particular media, whatever it was. Okay. I don't know if it was TV, video games, I really don't know. But they decide they're not going to expose their child to particular media. Children come into school wearing things related to this.
Right.
And the family goes and contacts the person in charge and says, can you please ask the families not to dress their children this way? And I said, my response, you can look at me as nutty as you want, but this is happening. I also wish
people could see my face.
They can go to YouTube.
Go on YouTube.
Yes. Go to YouTube. You have to see Allison.
Yeah.
So again, I've had many conversations where people are saying, can you believe this? Can you believe this? Like, they want me to go back and tell these other families what decisions to make for their children because they're making a different decision and they don't want their children to see, hear, or taste any of this, which is fine. Okay. You can tell your own children, you can tell your own children, like, we don't do that. We're not doing that. But to say, please go back to all the other families, all 80 of them, all 120 of them, and tell them they cannot allow their children to dress this way or watch this or do this because I don't allow my child to do this. And so here's what I understand about it, because Allison is still looking at me, folks.
I am. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Here's so many things going through the head that I'm like, wait, what?
I know.
Okay.
Here's the part I understand. As a parent, you never want your child to feel left out. Correct. Totally get that.
Yes.
Right? Yes. You want your child to have a sense of belonging. Also, probably, as a parent, I don't really want to have the argument of everybody else is doing this.
True. Yeah.
3-year-olds may be a little too young to have that argument, but I'm going to bet you by mid-pre-K They're going home and saying, everybody else does this, says this, has
or,
this, and I want it.
I want it too.
Yep. And I want it. And so the families don't want to deal with that maybe, which I understand. That said.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. That said, as long as no one's being abused, neglected, or exposed to something that's really bad for them, and I'm talking really bad.
Yeah.
Families have a right to make the decision that their very young child can play this video game, watch this TV show, go see this movie, participate in this character thing, whatever it is. Right. They have the right to say, we will buy you a t-shirt that's related to it. We will have conversations with you about what you're watching, and we're not going to stop you from talking about it with other people. Yeah. They have a right to do that. Yeah. And yet, so many people want to impose their own decisions about their children on the entire population.
Right. Like, I find it like they want to dictate what other people do in their own homes.
Yes, they want to dictate.
Which is like, okay, if you want to make that decision for your household, fine, then make that decision for your household. But you can't come into my house and say, I can't watch something because of whatever. Right? So like I don't understand the
I'm telling you why. It's because
there's a word. You know what I mean?
Listen, here's why.
I can't say the word I'm thinking of.
Here's why.
Yeah.
Because they want their children to feel like they belong. They don't want them to feel left out. All those reasons that I understand. However, you have made a decision for your family. You can't expect every other family in the world to do the same thing.
Correct. And in life, as you get older, even in adulthood, you might not know pop culture references. I don't usually. Okay. You might not. So like, why not at a young age teach your child, hey, we don't believe in this because of this reason.
That's right.
So we won't watch that. When you are an adult, you can make a different decision. But for right now, this is the decision we made. And other families have different beliefs, so they might choose something different. And then teach the kid how to deal with that. Because when you're older and everybody's talking about a TV show and you're like, I don't watch that. I do this all the time. People are talking about certain movies that are coming out this weekend. I'm like, I don't have any clue about, so like, you just deal. I just deal. I talk about something else. I change the subject. I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm glad that you like that. You know what I mean? There's ways to teach your child how to have a conversation around it, or change the subject, or find common ground.
I'm just saying, you can't do that. You can't dictate to other families.
What I do in my house.
So, here's the thing. I remember times when my children were growing up, when they would say to me, well, so-and-so's allowed to do that. And I would say, well, I'm not so-and-so's mother.
Yeah.
And this is the decision I made.
Yeah.
And they would get very frustrated and very upset with me. And I stood by my decision. The reason I stood by my decision, the majority of times anyway, I'm sure there were times when I said, all right, you know what, let's just let them do it. But the reason I would stick by a decision is because it's a moral value of mine.
Yes.
Right? And it had to do with what I wanted my children to be exposed to and learn. And I didn't agree with every family. And I'm not required even to agree with every family. Yeah. And they're not required to agree with me. And we can all live our own lives.
Right.
So I remember saying to my children that whole, well, I'm not their mother. This is the decision that was made in this household. This is what we're doing. And if they got angry, they got angry. At the same time, I understand that you don't want your children being left out. So here's the thing, folks. I'm picturing people out there in podcast land having two different reactions to this.
Yes.
I picture some of the professionals nodding their heads and being like, yeah, I had this conversation with a family.
Yeah.
And laughing maybe.
Yes, because we have these conversations all the time.
Right. We have things in common.
Yeah.
And then I picture some families going, well, she's right. I don't want my child to feel bad like that. I totally get it.
I know.
I think one of the things in early childhood settings that we need to consider doing, in addition to teaching families about milestones, teaching families about developmentally appropriate practice, giving families advice about behavior, in addition to all that, we need to have some discussion with families when they enroll at things like open house, that sort of thing, that really plainly says, all of you have the right to make decisions related to what your children will see in the media, use, play with, where they're going to do things. You're right. Yeah. So as long as no one is going to be neglected or hurt, every one of you have these decision-making powers. We do not have the power to go and then intercede to ensure families are doing the same thing. I think we have to plainly say it.
Just say it.
And maybe we have to teach families how to explain to their children that it's okay to be different.
Yes.
It's okay to do things differently. And P.S., this is the decision we made for our family, like you said, Allison, because here's something we want you to know, learn, not be exposed to.
I'm 100% sure that you're not making this decision just willy-nilly. It's because like you have beliefs or maybe a religious thing, or it could be anything. Just you chose that from your values and beliefs, which are valid values and beliefs. That I assuming you made that decision because you want to pass those values and beliefs down to your children.
Could also be health and safety, though.
It could be a health and safety thing.
I remember when the boys were young, my children were young. So they watched wrestling. I may have said this before in the podcast. They watched wrestling and they loved it and they understood it was fake.
Yeah.
But young children will try to recreate it, and it was getting dangerous, frankly.
Yes.
It was getting dangerous, and so my husband and I outlawed watching wrestling here. We said no watching wrestling anymore because we can't have you doing that. And they had friends and neighborhood kids and all that who were watching wrestling, and they understood that in our house we're not letting them watch it anymore. But we explained to them, you are imitating this. Yeah. I understand why you're imitating this. Correct. It looks kind of cool, right? Yeah. Someone's going to get hurt. Yeah. And so we're not watching it anymore. Go watch something that's safer for you to imitate.
But I think the key to this scenario that you're talking about is you explained why.
We did.
And I think that's where it comes in. Like, we made this decision because we believe in this, or we want you to be safe, or we want you to be healthy, or we have these values. And if you're not explaining the reasons why you made those decisions, then they're just going to be like, oh, you just...
randomly. You just want to torture me.
Yeah, you're just torturing me, and this is why, whatever. But if you explain that, then you will kind of instill these values and this safety in them. But you have to, explain it to them in order for them to get that.
Yeah. So I had a thing when my children were young where I decided, it was particularly my older one, because by the time I had my younger one, I realized this is not effective.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm telling this story is because you can also change your mind about things.
Yes.
So I decided when Michael was young that we weren't going to have any kind of weapons. Okay. Not pretend ones, not real, nothing. We never had real ones, but we weren't going to have any kind of weapons. And that included things like fake guns for the kids to play with. Yeah. I didn't want to promote that.
Right.
And what I didn't think about, I think I knew it, but I didn't think about it at the time, is that if you don't give them those toys, they're going to make them out of Legos.
They figure it out.
Their own hand.
Yes.
Paper, the inside of paper towel. Like if they want something to be something, they can just pretend it is.
Figure it out. Yeah.
They can just pretend it is.
Yeah.
So I didn't think about the fact that they would just pretend it is anyway. So, by the time my younger one came along, we were buying the water guns and all that stuff. You can change your mind, folks.
Yes.
And when we talk about this, keep in mind, we have people who listen from everywhere and all over. Where we live, there is hunting, but it's not as big a thing as in other parts of our country. Yeah. And not as big a thing as in other parts of the world, maybe where Allison and I particularly live. Yeah. There are people who do it, but
my father did it.
Right.
And he taught my brother how to do it safely.
Right.
So
there are people who do it. Yeah. It's just, I think it's bigger in other parts of the country.
It's definitely bigger. Like when I lived in West Virginia, they have whole days off of school for it.
Okay. Yeah. That's not, so it's not like that here.
Yeah. So it is pretty big.
And I would be okay with them learning this if they learned it in a safe and appropriate way. I don't know. It was one of those things that you decide as a parent, and then you later on realize, well, I'm not sure why I made a big deal over that. Right. There can be things that you've decided for your children that when you sit and reflect on, you might decide, I don't know why I made a big deal over that. It's really not that bad. Let's just let them do it. Yeah. It's okay to revisit decisions that you made Especially if you see like, I don't know, all the other children are doing it. Was I wrong about this? Then you can go and look at it and you might decide I was not wrong about it and we're still not doing it.
Right.
You might go back and decide, oh, I think I might have been making a big deal over nothing. Yeah. No matter what you decide as a parent or anyone raising children, you can't impose that on other people. Right? You can't. And as I was saying, I think in our programs, we need to have conversations around this. I also had this conversation, it was maybe about a year ago or so, perhaps, where it was a professional, it was a teacher who saw all of the children having things related to a particular television show, and then one of the children didn't have that. She said to the family something about their child feeling left out, and you might want to consider doing it because all the other children are doing it. I highly advise against that either. Right? As professionals, we should not be stepping into that. Let the families figure that out because that's a family matter. Right. And then the families need to go back and figure out, is this something that I want to expose my child to? As a professional, honestly, the only television show I ever recommend these days is Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
I love Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
I love Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. It is the only one I talk about in a positive way. There are ones I talk about in not such a positive way. But that one I talk about in a positive way. Otherwise, I tend to try as a professional to not make these recommendations because it's so steeped in family values and culture and the beliefs they were raised in that I kind of don't want to step into that space, if that makes sense. And
I don't do that because I try to think of myself. I'm like, would I want somebody telling me what I can and cannot watch on TV at night? Like, don't tell me I can't watch football. Sorry, I'm gonna do it anyway. Like, and that's just as a person. Like, so I'm like, whatever you want your child to watch or do, like, go for it. Like, as long as it's not hurting them, I don't care. But because I wouldn't want somebody telling me what I can and cannot do in my own house.
Right. I don't want someone telling me.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Don't you find the people who say things like, I don't want anyone telling me what to do, are sometimes the ones who want to tell everybody else what to do.
Yes.
Right? Like, yes. Every family has a right to make their own decisions. We need to intentionally have conversations around that if we're someone who works with families. Yeah. To say, I know every family makes their own decisions. Every family has a right to. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you have your own children or you're raising children, folks, make your own decisions. You can't decide this for other people. Yeah. Please don't go back to these teachers and administrators saying, please tell all of the 150 other families not to let their child watch this show. It's not, we can't do that. We simply can't do that.
Yes.
I know in the state we're in, there are no laws on the books that say anything about what TV shows children can watch. Right. This is a family decision based on advice by experts maybe, or what their own values are or their own priorities are. Yes. So consider, if you're in a professional setting, consider either you yourself or going back to an administrator and saying, here's a conversation you might have to consider having with families. Listen to this podcast episode and what's going on out there. Listen to what's going on. And if it's never happened with you or in your program, you have this opportunity to nip it in the bud, or even before it's a bud, by saying, I think we should include this talk in our conversations because it makes sense that these are the conversations happening in other programs and schools. Yeah. Okay, our preschool peeps. We hope that you will join us again on the next episode next Monday. Thank you to everyone who's been writing to us. Yes. They've been coming vastly through the contact form on our website. Yes. So please go to our website, howpreschoolteachersdoit.com, and you contact us just to say hi even, right? Yeah. Hi, everybody. And we will catch you next time on the podcast.
Bye, peeps.